Welcome to More Than Dentistry, where your hosts Evert and Waldo discuss life, dentistry, and everything in between with dentists around the world.
Hello and welcome to the More Than Dentistry podcast.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Today I have the privilege to have Dawie Roodt with us in a virtual conversation. He is the chief economist at the Efficient Group. He's also the director. And he's the anchor presenter at Ontbytsake. Dawie, tell me quickly, who was your most memorable interview that you've had on Ontbytsake?
Hello, Waldo. It's very nice joining you and very nice talking to you. And I must tell you, I hate that question. Why do you ask me that question? Because there are so many such amazing people that I had the opportunity to have interviews with. Yes. So it's unfair to ask me that. I mean, it's such a long list. I will keep you busy for very long if I tell you about all my most memorable moments, because everything or most of people were memorable in one way or the other. Certainly, some people stood out for me because of whatever reason. But everybody, in a way, was memorable.
I see my partner that usually does the podcast with me, Evert Burger. He is also a powered paraglider. And I see you have national colors in paragliding, power. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I always wanted to fly. I've always had this thing about flying, and I started doing my PPL license at one stage, and then for various reasons I started working in Johannesburg. I couldn't continue with that. And then one day I saw the guys flying paragliders. This is what the guys flying around the mountains typically do. And I had the opportunity, and I met people flying with paramotor, and that's where you put the engine in your back. Yes. And I started flying paramotors as well. Initially I started flying paragliders, and then I went from there. I went into paramotors where the engine is in your back. And I started flying that, and I flew quite a lot of that, and I've had a couple of very, very close falls on paramotors, and I eventually got elected as the South African team, and I participated in the World Championships in China, and I've got a picture on my wall. I'm looking at it right now, where I am flying with my paramotor over the Great Wall of China. But paramotors it's the smallest motorized way of flying. And it is it's an amazing sensation to do that.
Great. Well, I think let's maybe get stuck into everything today. When we're looking at this whole situation with the pandemic that we have, I say it feels like a bad game of hide and seek, where the seeker is also busy hiding and no one knows where the den is. What's your experience with a lockdown at this stage for your personal business and for the country?
Yes. Well, personally, let me start with that. That's the easiest part. Personally, I can hardly feel the difference. The only difference is I don't drive around that much and I don't fly around that much, because my life consists mostly, or a lot of my life consists of flying all over the place. I'm flying a lot. I mean, I fly sometimes 2-3 times a week. And sometimes I go to Cape Town literally for 1 hour meetings. And that is the sort of silly things that we used to do. And I say used to do because I believe that the world is going to change. We're probably not going to do those sort of things in future anymore. For me, not really much happened. I was still working at home. I've never been this busy. Technology allows me to talk to my people all the time. We are extremely busy, and especially with the financial markets doing what they are doing, we've got more than enough to keep us busy. And I'm in contact with my people all the time. So for me personally, of my business, there was hardly any change, except that we've become far more busy than what usually is the case, and we're doing most of it at home. And I have been working previously from home in many instances, so there's not really that much that changed to me. But perhaps the difference is that the children are around now. So far I haven't killed anybody. Things are going fine. And I think slowly we're getting into this new way of living. So it's actually quite enjoyable. But I'm the lucky one, because the majority of people out there do not have it as lucky as comfortable as I have it. There are many, many poor people out there. the South African economy is going to go through an extremely difficult time. Poverty is going to increase. Unemployment is going to increase with large numbers. And I think that this lockdown, and I totally supported the president at the beginning, but I'm afraid I think it's gone too far now. And I think subsequently we've learned a lot about the virus, and we've learned a lot about the impact on the economy. And I think we are probably going to kill more people through an increase in poverty than what the virus actually is going to kill. So I certainly do think that the damage done to the South African economy has reached a certain level now where we really and seriously must reconsider whether we want to continue with this lockdown.
Yes. Yeah, I've read your article on Maroela Media. I'll also put that in the notes, and that's something that you spoke quite passionately about, is how poverty is going to affect South Africa.
Yes, I've done some calculations, and people tell me that I'm a heartless economist because I always think about money and I don't think about people's lives, and that is, of course, completely and totally incorrect. The economy is not about money. The economy is not about making money. The economy is not about financial markets or interest rates or exchange rates. The economy is about people, and it's only about people. And incidentally, we sometimes use certain instruments and we use certain tools and formulas to understand people better. But in the first instance, the economy is always about people. And there is absolutely no doubt that poverty is the biggest killer in the world. And you can see where any country that you look at, if you talk about a wealthy country, everything that's good corresponds with wealth. And that is good life expectancy, good education, good health services, good infrastructure. Everything that's good corresponds and correlates with wealth. While everything that is bad, like crime and low life expectancy, everything that's bad corresponds with poverty. And without a doubt, if you put all these pestilence and illnesses and viruses, if you put everything together, cancer and diabetes, all these reasons, all these killers, if you put them all together, they will not nearly kill as many people as poverty. Poverty, without a doubt, is the biggest killer out there. Yes. And I'm afraid we're going to see a substantial increase in poverty.
Dawie, if we can almost divide our discussion today into from a microeconomic to a macroeconomical discussion in the sense of looking at personal economics for the people that are listening, the dentist, and then looking at the country's economics and then the world economics.
Yes, we can. I guess we can look at it on a micro level and then sort of expand it out a little bit. Yeah. I must tell you, I prefer perhaps to start off with the international economic and then sort of zoom in locally. That makes sense a little bit more for me because I think it sets context a little bit better, if you don't mind. Okay. Let me just complete that specific point. And that is that we're probably going to kill a couple of 100,000 people because of the increase in poverty over the next few years. And I'm pretty sure the virus is not going to kill a couple of 100,000 people in the country. Anyway, this virus or this crisis, and indeed this is the crisis, happened at the time when the world economy was already going through a very difficult time. Now there were, and there still are, quite a number of political new developments internationally, and I think we can call it the form of new nationalism that has taken hold internationally.
Yes.
I think Donald Trump is a good example of that, and Brexit is a good example of that, and there are many other examples of that as well. But economically, there are two things that actually stand out internationally. One of those is that debt levels internationally is the highest it has ever been. Governments never owed so much money than what they are owing today. Corporates, companies never owe as much money as that they owe today.
Yes.
Not necessarily banks, the way that we saw things happening 10 years ago, but without a doubt, debt levels are at extreme high levels, record high levels internationally, making many institutions quite vulnerable if there is a slowdown in economic activity. Additionally, internationally, interest rates were the lowest, still are the lowest it's been forever. We've never seen in the history of mankind interest rates this low. Interest rates are exceptionally low. And central banks are participating in the financial markets in all sort of manners that we never got used to. This is not the way I was taught what central banks are supposed to be doing. Central banks are literally printing money out of nothing, and they use this money to do all sorts of things like buying government debt instruments and buying even equities on the equity market. And in the process, what has happened is that interest rates, central banks have been cutting interest rates to very low levels, in fact, on some instances to below zero, while on the long end of the yield curve or long-term interest rates also have been reduced to very low levels. Now, so we have this completely weird situation internationally, but locally to an extent as well, but internationally, where we have record high levels of debt, but at the same time, we have record low levels of interest or interest rates. And that simply does not make sense, because we're supposed to have, with high debt, supposed to have high interest rates as well, which certainly is not the case. So that was the situation internationally, and of course a number of other things were also apparent, like the trade war, especially between America and especially the Chinese, but in many countries in fact. And during these uncertain times, a new virus from Wuhan in China made its appearance. Now, initially, the financial markets reacted a little bit because there was uncertainty about how serious this is going to be. But gradually, as the financial markets learned more about this virus, it became clear that this virus, or not necessarily the virus, but the measures that are being put in place to contain this virus, is going to have a huge impact on economic activities. And then, approximately a month ago, things started going horribly wrong when the financial markets corrected quite viciously and quite aggressively. And we saw huge fall on the world financial markets, collapse on the world financial markets in many instances. Now, the reaction by the authorities was pretty much as expected. The big countries in the world, they cut interest rates even further where they could, and they printed even more money, and governments announced all sort of new projects and programs to support their economies. And we're talking about really, really, really big amounts of money that are being planned to spend in the world economies and in an attempt to get those economies growing again. Fortunately, it had some positive impacts on some of the financial markets, but the reality is that what we saw beforehand in the form of more government and central bank interference in the financial market, we are probably in future going to see even more of that. The world financial markets are totally awash in cash at the moment. So that's what's been happening internationally. And that, of course, is a weird world that South Africa somehow must find its place, and somehow South Africa needs to navigate through this world ocean of cash on which we are all floating.
Dawie, if we say that Africa's debt is about 1.9% of the world debt, and South Africa, in 2019 was about 0.3% of the world debt. It's probably higher now. I mean, it doesn't look like anyone can service these debts, and this is just becoming unsurmountable, this heap of money that people are trying to pay or pay not. It feels like a bad business deal where two buddies buy 2 dozens of bread rolls, and the one partner buys one for R1 and he eats it, and then later the other one wants one and he eats it, and they pay this for a whole dozen of bread rolls with R1. How isn't this maybe a point in time where it's time to say, listen, let's start all over again. Let's cancel the world debt, because who are we indebted to? Not just Africa, but even the world powers. They owe much more than we do. Do they owe this debt?
Yes. Well, yeah. I did mention that they've got record high debt levels internationally and locally as well, and I'll get to that as well. So who is the money owed to? Well, the money is owed to mostly to the savers, and the savers are typically the pension funds of this world and various asset managers. Like, for example, I'm an asset manager. I manage people's money, and I take the money and I put it in an income fund as an example, and I use this money in the income fund to buy government debt instruments. And of course, there are banks buying this debt, and there are insurance companies buying this debt. So if you want to cancel a debt, then you must also tell pensioners that, listen, I'm going to cancel your pension because that's their savings. So you can't just cancel the debt unless you make some sort of plan with the savers or the investors or the pensioners out there. So we certainly we owe it to ourselves, although there's a degree of cross-border debt allocation that certainly is important as well. But mostly all this debt is owed to ourselves, and particularly much of this is owed to our pensioners. And certainly if we cancel that debt, our pensioners will not have a pension.
Yeah, but I mean, hypothetically speaking, now that would if a government does not have debt to pay, then they have the ability to save because people don't have to pay that amount of tax, and people will have more money, and that will at least give the government to some sort of or some other instrument. The means to actually fund these people that need to be pensioned.
Okay, well, you're making one basic and fundamental mistake. And a basic and fundamental mistake that you are making is that if politicians have money available, they will spend it and they will borrow even more and spend even more.
Yeah.
If you give politicians more money, they will spend more money. That is a simple reality of life. Politicians always overspend because it's not their money, it is somebody else's money. Politicians never cut back on spending. And the South African government is an excellent example. In fact, I call the South African government, the tripartite alliance, is the most destructive force the South African economy has ever seen. The extent of the destruction, the financial destruction that has happened in South Africa, the likes of we have never ever seen before. And there are many examples. It's not only Eskom and South African Airways, it's the state's finances itself that has been run into the ground financially. It has been destroyed, the state's finances. And not only the state's finances, also operations of many of these institutions. And a good example again is Eskom, or in South African Airways for that matter. So we have a government in South Africa for various reasons, some of it ideological reasons, but we have a government in South Africa that's caused immense damage to the South African economy. In fact, we were in a crisis before this virus. Yes. The average South African is today poorer than 5 years ago because of the mismanagement of the South African economy by this government in the past. And on top of that crisis, we have a new crisis called a virus. So no, and yes, and in the process what has happened is that the debt levels of the state has reached new record highs, and it's become nearly impossible for us, the taxpayers, to repay this debt because the debt levels is increasing at an alarming rate. And in fact, the state's debt levels will reach new record highs in fact, it is already at new record highs. And the rate at which the politicians keep on borrowing is completely and totally unsustainable. So let me put it to you in very simple terms. Because of a destructive government in South Africa, called the ANC Alliance, we are simply in a position today where we are so deep in trouble that I must be honest and tell you that I do not know how we're going to get out of this financial.
Yeah. Has this crisis the potential to wipe out the middle class? And I mean, the poorest of poor is going to perish. And then we are going to all become dependent on a state that can't provide and basically sell us to the highest bidder. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, well, I don't think the poor is going to die of hunger. I don't think so. Because it's got to go a long way before people start dying of hunger. It's certainly possible eventually. There's a good possibility that some of our neighbors may die of hunger this year. I'm referring to Zimbabwe and Mozambique as an example. And eventually, I hope not, but eventually it may happen in South Africa as well. But the reality is, and your point about the middle class is a very valid point. Remember, when you talk about a class, a middle class as an example, it's not an income determined category of people. It's more a network. Because let me give you a good example. My son He's qualified and he just started working, and he's just been informed that his salary will be cut in half. Now, he's certainly, in terms of income, he's not part of the middle classes. He's in fact a very low income category at the moment. But he still is part of the middle classes because he has a support network. If necessary, he can come and stay with us, as an example. So that is what constitutes a middle class, not income, but a support network. And I think this is important to understand. But you're right. Many individuals that are so-called part of the middle class are very much dependent on the state. There are nearly 2 million people that are paid by the state. The majority of them are completely overpaid and underworked. And that's part of the reason why the state's finances are in such deep trouble. And eventually, the state will run out of money. And eventually, those guys that are dependent on the state, they will lose their privileged income and high levels of income where they are. And that will have an impact on them. But certainly, some private sector middle-class people are already losing their businesses, are already losing their jobs. And that will have a huge impact on the South African economy and on the so-called middle class, without a doubt. But it is the poor, it is the unemployed, and their ranks will increase quite dramatically this year. It is the poor and the unemployed that will be affected, and it will be those mostly that's got no capital, nothing to fall back on, no proper network, and of course people with inferior skills. And it will be very difficult for them to get employment sometime in future again. So, yes, the middle class will be affected, but it's the poor that I'm mostly concerned about because there are many, many of them, and yes, there are going to be millions more now after this economic collapse.
On one side, this pandemic has also become almost a sort of a perfect storm for the need for universal care, healthcare in South Africa. What are your thoughts in the light of the pandemic? Of not that we can afford it, but do you think that this will would be powerful the cause for the ANC to really lock down on doing the NHI?
I don't think the national health insurance is going to happen. Or maybe this virus can change my mind on that. But so let's just unpack. What I'm very seriously concerned about is that during this lockdown, there are many special powers that were given to the various authorities, to the police, and to the army, and to the various ministers. And they can basically run this country any way they see fit. They've got all these emergency powers.
Yeah.
And so, except of ignoring the medical industry for a moment, from an ideological point of view, I am exceptionally concerned about all these excessive powers that have been granted to the bureaucrats. Because knowing bureaucrats, you give them power, they never give that power back again. And there are already examples of that. Tele, for example, did say that he likes this ban on alcohol. He wants to extend it after the lockdown, for example. Now, that's an example of a bureaucrat, an ineptocrat, I like to call them, that simply want to hold on to the extended powers and not going to give it back. From a general point of view, be extremely careful when you give powers to bureaucrats. They never ever give it back again. That's a generally common. That also means that if the pandemic really gets quite bad in South Africa, the state's medical services, as we all know, has all but collapsed. It is very badly run. If you really want to die, go to a state hospital. The kind of services that you get there is absolutely horrible. So the state medical services have mostly collapsed, primarily because of bad management. Certainly, money is always a problem, but it's primarily because of the bad management. Many countries in the world spend less than us on medical services, and they do a far better job. And because of the bad management of the medical, especially the public medical industry, inevitably what could happen if the pandemic becomes worse is that the politicians may use these extended powers and simply take over the private health industry as well.
Yes.
So in a weird kind of way, it may actually accelerate the national health insurance because politicians see this as an opportunity to take over the private medical facilities as well. And once they've taken over that, they're never ever going to give it back. So that is a serious and a real threat to all South Africans, especially if you are part of the medical health industry. Apart from that, those are arguments arguing or suggesting that the NHI could, in fact, be closer than what we think. The argument against that are the following. There simply isn't money to implement the NHI.
Yeah.
So there just isn't money. There's another reason why will be doubtful on whether the NHI will be implemented, ignoring the virus for a moment, and that is that the civil servants are also mostly members of the private health industry, and they certainly wouldn't want to be serviced by their fellow civil servants in the state hospitals, and they will not give up their private medical benefits. So they will put pressure on their unions, like for example in COSATU, and COSATU eventually will withdraw their support for the NHI because of their members simply opposing it. But the most important part why the NHI is not going to happen is, and this is a benefit of having an incompetent government. An incompetent government cannot implement a good idea, but an incompetent government can also not implement a bad idea. So I think there simply isn't enough capacity in the civil service to implement something like the NHI. And if you really ask me, although there could be attempts, like during this pandemic, to nationalize the private health sector, I am not really too concerned about this. And I do not think the NHI will really happen for the reasons that I've mentioned. And in fact, I think chances are quite good now in future that we will have a much weaker state, but that will be even less capable of implementing bad ideas like the NHI. Yeah. But I think the reality also is this quarantine or lockdown is just not possible in many instances. Like, for example, the informal settlements. It is impossible to enforce that. And on top of that, I did mention the cost to the South African economy is going to be horrendous. People are getting hungry already. So I didn't think this lockdown is going to last that long because people are simply will start to ignore that because they're hungry. It's really as simple as that. And not only are they hungry, they're losing their businesses, they're losing their salaries, they need to go out. So no, I don't think it's going to last long. In fact, if I was the president, I will as soon as possible try to open up this economy as much as we possibly can. And I would, of course, with that, you have to put measures in place to prevent the spread of the virus as much as we possibly can. But you cannot put this economy in lockdown forever or even for another extra week because the cost to the economy and eventually to lives is just far too expensive.
They say we had a recuperation after 2008 was roughly about between 12 and 18 months. What are we looking at to get back on track?
The answer is we have to remember that the economy was in a recession before this crisis. And I'm afraid politicians are going to blame this virus for everything now. But the reason why we are in such deep crisis is because of mismanagement. Let's just understand that. On top of that, the average South African today is poorer than 5 years ago. So it really depends on where you want to go back to. But I've calculated, and the South African economy is probably going to contract close to 10% or even more, around about there. We don't really know. But the South African economy will report a significant contraction in economic activities in this year. And if you talk about a minus 10%, for example, on top of all the other mismanagement and the bad policies and all of that, I will be surprised if we will be back to where we were a couple of months ago in 10 years' time. I think it's probably going to take us many, many years to get out of this hole, because it's not only getting out of this hole that we need to fix, we also have to fix certain important policy issues in South Africa, and we need to make certain important structural adjustments in South Africa, and we haven't even started with those. We still don't have electricity. In fact, Eskom just announced that we're probably going, the moment the economy starts running again, there will be even more blackouts. And that's not all. We have issues like the fiscal accounts that I've mentioned that we need to address and those sort of things. So this virus is only just one more crisis that has hit the South African economy after the one crisis after the other. So I'm afraid even if we start doing everything right, it's probably going to take us years before we're out of this one.
When we get back to the man on the street or maybe the dental professional that is usually self-employed or is employed in a group practice that's now basically lost about 3 weeks worth of work and pay, and possibly another 2 weeks. What should we expect when we get back to our how can we buffer the damage that has been done into our practices?
Yeah. Yes. Well, it really depends on who you are. But let's look at the generic answer to the question. So, what can we do? What can we do if you're a professional? What can we do once you go back to work again? What can you do to reduce the risk on yourself and on your family as much as you possibly can, and on your business as well? So I think there are a couple of things that are important. One is that you have to know what is going on. So make sure that you read the newspapers. Make sure that you read the various forms and sources of news, and make sure that you're well informed. You must know what is going on. So make sure that you know what's going on around. The second thing that you need to know, and I'm just mentioning this from a high level, the second thing that you need to know, and that depends on what industry you are, but you must be able to identify those risks that are typical of your industry. So identify risks in your industry, and it really depends on industry to industry. I guess in your kind of dental environment, the risks that dentists typically will be faced with now in future is that there will simply be fewer clients because people will be poorer and they're not going to go to the dentist. So that is a risk. Identify that risk and manage that risk in one way. And that's the last point then. Once you've identified your risks, then try to manage your risk as well as you possibly can. Now, the management of risks come down to a number of things. Like, for instance, make sure that you have a proper budget on an individual basis. Make sure that you have a substantial portion of your portfolio invested abroad. I cannot keep on hammering on that. People, make sure you have money abroad. We are in deep trouble in this country. I don't trust this government. Make sure you've got money abroad. Make sure, if you have a business, make sure that you cash flush, that your cash flow is as healthy as you possibly can. Because under these sort of circumstances, you want to be cash flush. You want to make sure that there's money available for some sort of crisis if necessary. So make sure about those sort of basic things. But it's the same for everybody. It's nothing different in your from a higher level in your specific industry. That we're all facing the same kind of basic challenges here. In that is our clients and our customers will be fewer. They will be poorer. It will be more difficult to get money out of them. Cash flow will be under pressure, that sort of stuff. Now, and there are many things that you can do to alleviate that. You can go to the bank and renegotiate, see if you can get an extension on your loans, if that is really necessary.
Is that wise though? Sorry, is that wise to do something like that?
Well, if you have a choice between extending your repayment in your loan or closing down your doors, then it's better to rather extend the payment in your loan. So it really depends on individual to individual. But the Reserve Bank did cut back on interest rates. It is a little bit easier to repay your loans now. But again, do your sums, do a cash flow, see what your requirements are. To see what, and a very important thing is, don't wait for the bank to contact you. You contact the bank first.
Yes. And
come with some kind of a proposal to the banks. And if necessary, postpone that, but always try to be on the conservative side, but rather err on the conservative side, and make sure that you always have an extra set of plans somewhere that you can look at if necessary.
Yeah, so let's say we had a cash flow projection from the beginning of the year, and we had some certain goals that we wanted to achieve, and now we've got a big spanner in the works. How should we realistically adjust our expectations? Should we say, listen, we need to look at 50% output the first few months and then 60% and go on? But we can't, what would be like a realistic way of looking at your cash flow? I mean, it's really difficult question now.
No, I don't think it's that difficult. I think a reasonable way of looking at your cash flow is to take a significant knock on your cash flow projections as soon as possible. So cut back, for example, April, you're not going to get anything or hardly anything in terms of cash flow. So bring that down 80% to 90% to whatever the case might be. In May month, May will also be affected. Less so, but reduce that also, maybe to 60 or 70% of what you normally get. And then gradually you bring it up and return it to, well, not to normal, but to less than normal. In total, I would say your cash flow for 2020, bring it in at 20% below your original estimates for cash flow for 2020. So if you can end the year with a cash flow 20% below your original estimates, then that I would say it's a fairly conservative budget.
Okay. From an opportunistic perspective, this was one of the questions from our listeners is, how can we use this opportunity to expand and possibly thrive? If you look at companies that have started in tough times and are now basically empires, if you look at Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. Are we in a position to start looking at opportunities like this?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question. What are the opportunities during crises like this? And the answer is yes, there are amazing opportunities. I am an asset manager. I can tell you the financial markets completely collapsed, and I can see bargains all over the place. And my clients, those ones that stuck out with us, that did not, and unfortunately for us, we didn't use lines during these difficult times. But our clients that stayed with us, they actually given us more money, and we are buying amazing bargains for them. And their portfolios are doing exceptionally well after the initial collapse, of course. So that is one example in my specific industry where there are amazing opportunities out there. Everybody wanted to have a certain share at a certain level 2 months ago, and now nobody wants it even at half that price. No, that's silly. So those are the kind of opportunities that we see in our industry. And I guess the same applies to all industries. What will happen under these sort of circumstances is that people are scared, people are uncertain, and when people are scared, they don't do anything. They don't buy anything. Even if they come across an amazing bargain, they will not buy that because they're scared, they're uncertain. And if you're a bit of a shrewd businessman, this is the kind of opportunities that you can use. So yes, absolutely, in your industry, if you find the opportunity to buy another business in your industry, consider that. Go to the bank. You may get money to use the bank's money to buy that. But of course, like everything else, make sure that your cash flow is sufficient to pay that off, even if there's another bit of a crisis that hits the South African economy or the economy generally speaking. So yes, there are many opportunities out there. And I think, for example, if you're a young individual and you haven't not yet bought your own property prices are going to fall. Interest rates are very, very low. Now maybe it's a chance that you can stick your finger or your toe into the water and take it and the chance to acquire your first property. Not that I like property as an investment. Generally speaking, I don't like property as an investment. But the point I'm trying to make is that there should be many excellent buys available at the moment because everybody is fearful. And when everybody is fearful, that is when the shrewd investor should take his chances.
Yeah, another question I had was, I think you've answered it partly, but you said to take your money offshore. They asked, how should we invest? RA's property, gold, offshore, or all of the above?
Well, it really depends on the individual how you should construct your portfolio. For example, if you're 90 years old and you've got 1 million rand and that's all you've got, I will put all the money in the money market and that's it. So it really depends on who you are. But generally speaking, what I prefer to do, if you decide to stay in South Africa, we call it a SILU approach. So I will create a cash investment kind of thing, like for example a money market kind of investment, of which one can live. And let's call that SILO 1. So that's an emergency fund, and when you put in your short-term money and you get some interest on that, and that's the kind of money that you're going to lose if you retire. that's the kind of money that you're going to live off, literally. So that is short-term money, typically in a money market fund. And then your second silo will be in equities, equity investments in South Africa. There are really good opportunities. So, but that is slightly longer term money. That is not short term money. That's slightly longer term money. And I would certainly, for example, invest in the South African equity markets, or even in the South African bond market. But personally, I'm involved in equity management, and that's what I do personally. So I like to construct a local share portfolio for my clients. So the first silo is in cash or equivalents. The second silo is in a local share portfolio. And then the third silo, and this is extremely important, is to invest a substantial portion of your assets abroad. And again, what I do is share portfolios, and I manage international share portfolios and local share portfolios. Let's call that the third silo. So, and as you go through life, through your retirement, once you've depleted your first silo, the short-term money, then you start dipping into your second silo, that's the local equity portfolio. And once you've depleted that, then you go into your third silo, and that is the international equity fund. And gradually use it in that sequence. But those are the way that we structure typically portfolios. But again, it really depends from individual to individual, because all individuals got different risk appetites and different stages of their lives, different other investments. It really depends from individual to individual. Yeah. But I would certainly make sure that a substantial portion of your assets are invested abroad for a number of reasons. But I think political reasons is one of those important considerations.
Yeah. If we always say that after we've got an economic crisis, we always see that there's a correction in the market. Just after, it sometimes takes some time. How long do you think will we have to wait for a correction? I mean, there's already some correction that has taken place, but are we going to get record highs in like what sort of time frame are we looking at? And then at the same time, is that how long? I mean, it almost feels like we're having these crises or coming up more and more. I mean, it wasn't long ago where we had a big crisis with 2008. Are we going to see that those intervals are going to become shorter?
Yes, you're asking a couple of very interesting questions, and let me get to the last one, and that's the cycles on the financial markets are indeed getting shorter and shorter. And I think part of the reason why the cycles are getting shorter and shorter is because of the interference, especially of the central banks. So that when the financial markets collapse, the central banks cut back on interest rates and really aggressively stimulate the financial markets, and the markets bounce back quite quickly. I don't think it can last forever. I think a really big crisis will eventually hit the world financial markets, and maybe this could be the one. But cycles are getting shorter. There's little doubt about that. But how long is it going to take this time? I think there are two things to look at. The one is that financial markets are always forward-looking. So the best time to buy into financial markets is when things are really, really going bad. Because everybody feels negative, but the financial markets are starting to discount a better future. And we've already seen that. Financial markets in fact, worldwide, has already bounced to an extent. So the financial markets, we've had a bull market and a bear market, all of that in 1 week. So yes, the financial markets are always forward-looking. And although the world economy is not really in a recession yet, the recession is only coming, the financial markets are already looking through the next recession to the next growth phase in the world economy. So it's always forward-looking. The second important point, and I've already made that to an extent, is that the authorities, especially the central banks, will go out of their way to stimulate the financial markets, and all this money that they are pumping into the system needs to go somewhere, and it will go to inflating prices, to pushing up prices like we've seen in previous crises as well. So I will not at all be surprised if we see the financial markets back to new record highs within literally a few months. Despite the fact that the world economy may still be in a recession, financial markets may already be at new record highs.
I think if we can almost end off, if you had an ideal world, what would your ideal world look like at this stage? If you could change a few things make everything a little bit better for everyone, for the poorest of the poor to the guy that wants return on his investment, what would your way you would structure everything, and to see that the house of cards are not tumbling down?
Yes, you're asking me what I would do if I had the power and how I would structure everything in the way that I see, that I think is best. And since I'm an economist, I mean, that's where I will start. And again, economics is not about money. Economics is about people. So I believe that a successful economy is an economy, or a successful country is a rich country, is a country with low unemployment, with good education, good everything that's good. You find that in a wealthy country. So I want South Africa to become wealthy as quickly as absolutely possible. But you cannot create wealth by taking wealth away from the wealthy. What you need to do, you have to create opportunities for the poor also to become wealthy. And I think something that we all must understand, that we are losing a lot of wealth because of the mismanagement from the South African economy because of this government. So I think we don't necessarily have an economic problem. We have more of a political issue in South Africa that we need to address. And one thing that we simply cannot go on doing is that the state cannot be this big and the state cannot spend this much money. The state must be reduced in size. The state must spend less money. So that must be step number one, for the state to spend less money, and dramatically so. And thereafter, without going into too much detail, but thereafter I will liberalize. I will liberalize every facet and aspect of the South African economy. I will allow people, I will get rid of minimum wages. I will allow people to work wherever they want to, for whatever price they want to. I will absolutely make sure that private property rights are protected. I will reduce the tax burden as much as absolutely possible. I will make it easier for anybody to trade with whoever they want to. And I will try to create an environment that is safe and friendly for investors. And that should be our approach. We have to understand that if you want to be successful, and I don't mean with that only economically successful, if you want to be a successful country, that is a wealthy country, that's a country with long life expectations, that is a country with good education and good infrastructure and good health services, you must have a successful economy. And I'm afraid the way that we've been approaching this the last couple of years is the reason why we are so poor today. It is the reason why we are not equipped to handle this virus today, because of the wrong macroeconomic policies in the past. That's what we need to fix. We have to create an environment for a successful economy.
Well, Dawie, thank you very much. Is there before we go, if you can just give everybody your where can people can get hold of you? I understand that the Efficient Group is also it's not just only one office. You have multiple locations at this stage.
Yeah. No, we've got about 500 people working for us. We are responsible for approximately 200 billion, this with a B, 200 billion rand. We've got many, many clients. I'm responsible for asset management and the share portfolios and so on. So you're more than welcome. You send me an email. I write a lot and I'll put you on my distribution list. It's all for free. If you need any investment advice, any financial advice, send me an email and I'll make sure that somebody contact you or I will contact you. And my email address is it's easy, it's Dawie Roodt, one word, DAWIEROODT, Dawie Roodt at efgroup.co.za. EF like an Echo Foxtrot Group or Efficient Group, efgroup.co.za.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dawie, for your time. And I hope one day we can meet in person, shake each other's hand, and show some teeth at the same time without a mask.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope we open up the economy quickly. Thank you, Waldo. Very nice to talk to you.
Okay, thank you,